I'm Richard Morris from Canberra, Australia. In 2014, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. After taking the dietary advice of the Australian Diabetes Association, I became more diabetic.
Oh, no.
I did some research which led me to the ketogenic diet. Long story short, I reversed my type 2 diabetes. In 2016, I was determined to help my buddy Carl by showing him what I did and the science behind it.
Hey, that's me. I'm Carl Franklin from the United States, and I also used to be a type 2 diabetic, but not as severely as Richard. I devoured all the information Richard sent me, and after a mutual friend went keto to address prostate cancer, I also went on the ketogenic diet. That was February of 2016. By April, I was already reversing my diabetes.
Yeah, we started a podcast called Two Keto Dudes to chronicle Carl's journey and provide some information to those who are curious about this dietary lifestyle.
Yep. And now we have over 200 podcast episodes, and some of them have been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. We also have an online community of tens of thousands of people who have followed us and changed their own lives.
We also founded an annual conference festival called Keto Fest. Carl and I are software developers. As such, we found ourselves at software conferences several times a year.
We really gravitate toward the conversations that happen in the hallways at a conference. Yeah. Sure, the talks are great, but it's the community that we enjoy the most.
So Keto Fest is a conference to discuss the latest research of ketogenic diets, but it's also a festival celebrating the lifestyle of ketogenic dieting.
Right. So, Richard, what is a ketogenic diet?
It's a diet where instead of burning sugar and starch for energy, my cells preferentially burn fat. And when my cells burn fat, that process produces molecules called ketones that fuel my brain.
Right. Our primary molecular fuels are glucose, which we make from carbohydrates, and fatty acids, which we make from fat. Mm-hmm. Our cells have two modes. In one, they burn glucose and make fat. In the other, they burn fatty acids and make ketones. But you don't have to eat a high-fat diet to be ketogenic, right?
When you're starting out, you may have to. And then, in a few weeks, as you become better adapted to burning fat for energy, when all of your calories come from fatty acids, the amount you need to eat becomes coupled to satiety, which integrates not only the variable amount of energy your body needs to run every day, but also the amount of fat that can be drawn down from storage.
So how many carbohydrates do we need to restrict ourselves to in order to get into that state?
It depends. Some of us who are metabolically disordered need to get below 20 grams a day. Somebody who's quite metabolically flexible can eat as much as 100 grams a day.
How about other nutrients like protein, minerals, and essential cofactors like vitamins and essential fats?
You need from 1 to 1.5 grams of protein for every kilo of lean mass. Beyond that, you just waste excess by turning it into energy instead of using fatty acids. As for other essential nutrients, if you're eating fatty meats or eggs plus leafy green vegetables, you'll get most of those because the organisms that made those foods have already concentrated essential cofactors.
Yeah, ketogenic diets are varied and delicious. They can be vegetarian or carnivore, home cooked or takeout, hot cuisine, or just bacon and eggs.
As long as your carbohydrates are low enough.
You can check out our Starting Keto podcast for more information at start.2keto.com. So let's check in. Richard, what's new with you?
I'm in lockdown. Canberra is in lockdown. For the first time in 399 days, we have one case of community transmission. In fact, we have six cases in the community, but 5 of them were close contacts of the first person. So,
wait, so
yeah, we have
one case and the whole country is locked down?
In the whole state.
The state is locked down. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So, but I mean, we've had no cases for like 400 days. So,
yeah, well, How long is the lockdown?
It's a week until we get to 0. And then if we don't get to 0, it goes to a second week and potentially we can get on top of it, because the thing is, when you have very few cases, testing and tracing becomes a lot easier. So we have 4-hour queues at the testing center where people are just lining up, to get tested, sort of, in a drive-through testing center. And so I think we're testing 30,000 a day, people a day.
Wow.
And so, we're pretty sure that we can trace this. And I think we have a team of tracers who are sort of going through all of the contacts of the person the people who've been infected and where they've been. And we have a pretty good system of, QR codes at every facility that you go to, so we can sort of backtrack what other people were in there and get them to get a test. So it's a lot easier to get on top of when you don't have 120,000 new people a day.
Yeah, right. Well, good luck. And I thought when you said you were in lockdown that we weren't going to see you for another year or so.
No. Well, it should only take a week, hopefully.
That's good.
But, and we also test the sewage, so we can tell, we knew there was a case before anybody was tested positive because the wastewater showed, presence of viral RNA. So, it's a very early warning system. So how have you been, Carl? How's your week been?
Pretty good. As I mentioned last week, I started a regimen of keto chow shakes.
You went on the Chris Bear diet.
Yeah, the Chris Bear diet. I'd much rather eat food, and I've always said this, that, we don't need no stinking shakes or whatever. But here's the results of this week. Yeah. No cravings. My cravings went to 0. And, nice. The keto chow kind of helps me keep my mind off food. But I have had meals, but my keto meals have been smaller, and I never felt the urge to overeat. So in short, the keto chow sort of helped me get back on track when I felt out of control. And the results are pretty good. I'm 15 pounds down since I started about 10 days ago, and my blood sugar and ketones are solid.
I should mention, this is not an ad. We don't do ads, so I know it sounds like an ad, but
no, yeah, it's not an ad. This is a real thing that I wanted to try because I never have, and I felt so out of control that I just needed something different. And it turned out that it really, really worked. So thanks, Chris and Miriam, and they're good friends of ours too. Anyway,
yeah,
so
that's true.
It's been a delicious journey so far.
Nice.
Well, we've checked in, and now it's time for.
Carl, you have missed that so much.
Yes, I have.
I can tell. It's a pent-up mail.
Yep. It's, I took a nod from Blue's Clues, which because I have daughters. They loved Blue's Clues. And so that was the very simple introduction to mail. Hey, this one this week comes from the forum, at ketogenicforums.com. And it's, once fat adapted, are we always fat adapted? And Chris says, hi all, I'm new to these forums, but not new to keto. I've been on and off for a few years now. My question is about fat adaptation, as I am training for a race in October. He doesn't really say what kind of race, bicycles or whatever, cycling or running. I don't know. I was keto for 4 weeks, then fell off the wagon on Sunday, and I've been eating carbs ever since, 5 days. I thought I screwed it all up, but I found this forum, and now I'm wondering, after reading posts on here, if I can just pick up where I left off regarding the fat adaptation process. If I get back to strict keto ASAP, can I get back to fat adapted? I do less than 20 grams net carbs per day. Will my fat adaptation process continue on, or am I back to square one? Thanks in advance, and any advice is much appreciated, Chris.
So everybody takes a different amount of time to become fat adapted, and it depends whether you were severely metabolically ill when you started, or if you were quite metabolically flexible, your fat adaptation will be a lot quicker. This is what metabolic flexibility really means. Metabolic flexibility means you can easily move from burning glucose to burning fatty acids. And somebody who is metabolically dysregulated is sort of locked into burning glucose. They can't burn fatty acids. And so, I suspect that if he's been on keto for many years, for a few years, and now he's gone off keto for 5 days, he's probably going to get back pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Now, if he had had a glucose tolerance test after 5 days of eating carbs, he would probably find that he's almost back to being a full-on carb burner. And this is problem that we have when you do a glucose tolerance test. If you've been on a low carb diet for long enough, because your body is adapted to burning fatty acids, it's expecting fatty acids, then all of a sudden you get a glucose tolerance test, which is 150 mils of glucose.
Right.
All of a sudden, your body doesn't really have the machinery to be able to utilize it. And so that first hit of carbs after not having carbohydrates for a long time, your body has to spin up a lot of machinery, and it takes several days to get there. And Dr. Kraft, who invented the insulin assay, used to say 2 weeks, eat 150 grams of carbs at least for 2 weeks, and then do the insulin assay with the oral glucose tolerance test, and then you can see what your metabolism's really doing. He didn't say how long it takes to get back to being fat adapted. My guess is, think back to when you first went keto. How many days did it take you? It took me 6 weeks, but some people get there in 2 weeks. If it took you 2 weeks, then I suspect, having been keto for a couple of years and just been off for 5 days, maybe it'll take you, another 5 days or a week to get back to all your cells being able to efficiently burn fatty acids the way they were 5 days ago. So what do we always say, Carl, when you fall off the wagon?
Bacon and eggs. Get right back on the horse.
Get right back up on the horse. So, yeah, that's my advice. What do you think? Yeah,
well, I can only tell you about my experience because I'm not a scientist. But my experience has been that, if I get off keto, and believe me, I did in the last couple of years, but not for 5 days. I never went 5 days. It's been like a keto cheat meal here, and then 3 or 4 days later of strict keto, another one, and that's kind of the worst that it ever got. But after doing that for a while, that sort of, half-assed pattern, which, by the way, is how I got diabetic in the first place. After doing that for a while, it just gets very, very hard to go through that, like a full week or a full week and a half. And for me, that's why I did what I did with the keto chow. Yeah. But, everybody's different. I'm not recommending keto chow for anyone who's in this particular spot or not. I'm just saying that it seems to have worked for me. But then again, I also have a podcast, and I got friends like you guys keeping me honest. Yeah. So
you know who we should talk to? We need to talk to a nutritionist. We need an expert on the. We really do.
Yeah. Yeah. If we only had a nutritionist that could come on the show.
New one.
Well, that brings us to our interview today. And our guest is Karen Ogilvie. Now, she's an RHN. Now, what is an RHN, Karen?
Hi, dudes. An RHN is a registered holistic nutritionist.
All right. Well, let me continue with your introduction. I'll read your bio. Karen began her keto journey in 2016 after being diagnosed with atrial fibrillation and prediabetes. Through time-restricted eating and a ketogenic diet, she has improved her A1C from 6.2 to 5.0 and lost 130 pounds, people.
Booyah!
Booyah! Her passion for helping others achieve health and wellness led her to create Wholly Holistic Keto on Facebook. She became a nutrition professional as a registered holistic nutritionist. If I had just read it, I wouldn't have had to ask you. Graduating from the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition in 2018. She can be contacted in her Facebook group, in the ketogenic forums, or via email at Karen@whollyholisticketo.com. Welcome.
Welcome, Karen.
Thanks for having me.
You've been on the show before. We had you as a guest before.
You did. Yeah. It was a while. It was about 4 years ago. Long time no chat.
Yeah. That was before you graduated, right?
That was before I started. I had just registered to take this. It was supposed to be a year-long course, but they sort of fibbed about it, and it was about a year and a half before you could take your board exam.
But we recorded when we were in Toronto. Richard and I went up to meet with Dr. Fung and Megan, and you were like, "Hey, I'm literally around the corner from you." Not really, but a good stiff drive away anyway. And
Richard thought I was literally around the corner. He said, "How about you come up and meet with us?" So I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I'll get there.
So it was you who introduced me to allulose. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that was Jennifer Kleiman. She has Moons Grove Farms, and she did a lot of experimenting with all the sweeteners. And that was the one that, because she was quite diabetic before she started keto, she wanted to find one that had all these benefits as well as not as tasting good.
So I got a little allulose story last night. I mixed some allulose with water to make a simple syrup. And it dissolves faster than regular sugar does, so it's amazing.
It does.
It's 75% as sweet as sugar, has absolutely zero aftertaste, and it has no, according to the research, has no effect on blood glucose levels. So I mixed a simple syrup. I got some Gosling's rum, and I got a little ginger seltzer.
Nice.
No, a little ginger seltzer. And some allulose, and I made a dark and stormy, and it was delicious.
Delicious.
Yeah.
See, with a bit of mint and soda and syrup and rum, you'd have yourself a mojito.
There's a mojito. Yeah, you gotta have a lime.
As a nutritionist, we like to say we talk poop all the time. So as a nutritionist, you have to be a little cautious with the allulose, especially if you're making a syrup. The dosage of allulose, the tolerance is weight based. So if you're a tiny person, don't have a lot.
Now, are you
because
talking?
It will go right through you.
Yes. Good advice, sage advice. Not something I've ever had to worry about from allulose, but I get it. Yeah, I understand that.
So now, Karen, you lost a lot of weight on keto when you first started in 2016, right? How much? 130 pounds?
It was about 130 pounds. I mean, I think it was like 130 pounds for a hot minute, and then I bounced back up to 120 pounds lost.
Yeah. but in trying to keep low, you ran into problems. I remember you saying that you lost a toenail at one point.
Yeah, going from losing 120 pounds to 130 pounds, I, like so many other people, became impatient that, things weren't going as quickly as they were before. And I had it in my head that I had to lose 2 pounds a week. I had to. And no one was going to take me seriously as a nutritionist unless I was thinner. Right. It turns out that's not true. It's, there are certain weight loss coaches that wouldn't take me seriously unless I was quite slim, but people that want advice from me because they're starting their own low carb journey, they appreciate the fact
I'm personally wary of anybody who offers me weight loss advice who's
never been morbidly obese.
Who's never been morbidly obese, because it's like you're dealing somebody that
honey,
you did this to lose like 10 pounds, or somebody that did this to lose 110 pounds. It's almost like you're dealing with two different animals.
And then John Panette says, you're really fat when you lose 100 pounds and your friends say, yeah, I can see it in your face.
That totally happened to me. I have a big fat head. So, I'd lose 50 pounds and people are like, oh, you look a little thinner around the chin there.
And then they continue to give you dietary advice where it's like, no, that 100 pounds you just lost, I don't know what you did, but here's how you really lose weight.
Right. Exactly. Well, and I bought into that a bit, and I guess I was feeling a bit insecure about my progress. I don't know why, because at that point I'd already lost 120 pounds. I was no longer diabetic and feeling pretty great.
Yeah. But
I decided to really push it. So I lost the 120 pounds through nutritional ketosis, time restricted eating, and some alternate day fasting. I did that quite frequently. And to push myself past that, what I decided to do was to have a smaller refeed between alternate day fasts. So a very lean, low calorie refeed. And that's where I ran into problems.
Wow. So you still got plenty of protein, But it was
low fat,
it's definitely
low
carbs.
I was
high
lifting
protein
weights. I was exercising. I was eating lots of protein, but I wasn't getting enough energy between fasts.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's a simple thing that people think that, if I just keep on reducing calories, I'll lose weight faster. And there's a point below which you now no longer have calories to waste on frivolous things like growing hair and toenails. And
that's what happened to me, that I was feeling unwell. I wasn't as energetic, and I was losing lean muscle mass.
Yeah.
That was where a great deal of those last 10 pounds came from.
Wow.
It wasn't, I was still losing fat. You can, if you're eating an 800 calorie a day diet, you will lose fat.
Yeah.
But
you
other
also
things
lose
happen.
A lot of lean tissue, and you get a metabolic haircut, basically.
Yeah, metabolic haircut.
Tell me about losing a toenail. How does that happen? Does it just fall off? Or is it just a red sore?
Well, they just were very brittle. Just very brittle, and just cracking and falling apart. And same with my hair. My menstrual cycle was off.
Wow.
It was just it was cold all the time. This went on for a few months. It's about 6 months of this before I said, okay, this is crazy.
So then you started eating again, and you regained some weight, right?
Oh, yes.
You regained.
I regained a lot of weight. So
this is why people should listen to you, because this
right.
is an experience that a lot of people know about.
Yes.
So I started, and eventually, instead of what I should have done was, when weight loss slowed, was just to become comfortable in my rut, just to keep calm and keto on, as some dudes once said. Or several times said, but what I did was I tried to dig myself too deep into a deficit, and then, I'd swing around and say, the heck with it. So you were talking about your, occasionally going off plan. In my Facebook group, we'd like to call that Cheetosis.
Cheetosis, yeah.
Which is
good.
a really good way to gain a lot of weight.
It really is, yeah. So it seemed like for a while there, every 4 days, I was having a grinder or a couple pieces of pizza or something, and it just
something like
work.
that. Yeah, I would tell people a really good way to gain weight is to be keto, Monday to Friday, and then spend Saturday eating pizza and butter tarts. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, it really is.
So how much did you put back on? So if you lost 130?
Lost a lot, 130, and I gained back between 50 and 60. Yeah, wow. It was significant. That was over 18 months.
Half your weight back. Yeah.
Yeah. That was over 18 months. Now the difference was, I think, any other time, like I've been a dieter since puberty, right? Like so many other women have been trying to lose weight since I was in high school, and other times when I had lost a significant amount of weight. Once, by doing it by really restricting calories and eating low fat.
Right.
When I go off plan, I would gain that weight back plus some. With this, because I was low carb most of the time, it saved me from gaining it all back.
Right.
Yeah.
And it saved me from becoming diabetic again.
Yeah.
But it's not a plan, unless you're somebody that is quite metabolically flexible. Having a really high carb day isn't going to work out because people that are more metabolically flexible tend to be able to burn those carbs quickly through physical activity. Yeah. So it's usually done for a purpose. I have some people that do carb cycling, and it's done for a purpose. But
because you're going to exercise.
Because you're going to exercise. Yeah. Richard and I always say carbs go in, carbs go out. Nobody can explain it.
Nobody can explain it. Well, it's like when I get on my bike, I basically blow a hole in my glycogen.
Yes.
I have glycogen stored in my muscles and in my liver for, in case I need them. Mm-hmm. If I go on my bike and do 14K to get to school and back, I'm going to draw down some of that, and that gives me a little bit of extra leeway. So, if I eat some more macadamias than I would normally eat, macadamias have a little bit of carbs in them.
A little bit.
But by poking a hole in my glycogen, I give myself a little bit of extra capacity. So
my weight gain started because of what I was eating. It was a little too much wine and a little too much cheese.
Yeah.
And I found that those things really set me back, and it doesn't take much.
You tried the French diet.
The French diet, yeah. I could eat cheese basically when we first started this show. Everything was cheese. Mm-hmm. I had no problems with it. And I guess, a few years older, a little more gray hair, and, a little more less tolerance to cheese. I don't know. Everybody's different.
Yeah, well, cheese, when you're starting keto, it doesn't really matter too much for most people how much cheese they're eating those first 2 to 12 weeks, depending. Yeah. But after a while, things like nuts and cheese, you can still have them, just in smaller quantities, or only once a week.
You think that's not a personal thing that I just experienced? You think that a lot of people have that experience?
It's a lot. It's a lot. I do take people through an elimination diet, and we remove all dairy and nuts and eggs, things that are very common in a ketogenic diet. And then we start testing adding them back, first with the egg yolk, then with the egg white, then dairy, and nuts are usually at the end. Just with diabetics, sometimes you'll see some strange numbers from a food sensitivity that they weren't aware that they had.
Yeah, Tim Noakes says that if people have trouble on his Banting diet, try removing nuts and cheese and that, or nuts and dairy, he says. But yeah. So you gained weight back, Karen. You lost 130 pounds and you gained back 60. But then something happened to you that hasn't happened to anybody else. During lockdown, you lost it all again.
I lost it all again.
How did you do that?
Well, what are you, a freak of nature?
I know. Well, in short, I got really spooked. Well, what I had done was I'd gained some weight back, and then it got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to gain anymore. I won't really try to lose weight, but I'm not going to gain anymore. I'm just going to be keto and not worry about gaining or losing.
Okay.
But then, March hit, March 2020. And, I went back home. I think Richard and I both left the airport on the 17th in Denver.
At the Low Carb Conference, yeah.
At Denver, the airport was almost abandoned at that point. But
I was on the last plane out to Australia. I mean, the plane after that had mandatory 14-day quarantines.
You literally did escape from LA.
I did. Snake.
But no, so I got home and I self-isolated for 14 days, did the thing. And I initially thought, okay, I live in Ontario and we went through SARS, and I think it was 2003. So I thought this is going to be like SARS. It's going to be kind of spooky for a while, but it'll go away. And it didn't. No. So I was at home, and just not gaining, not losing, just living my happy keto life. And then, we started to get some data coming in on outcomes. And, the first study, that I read was looking at in-range diabetics versus out-of-range diabetics for the blood glucose.
That was in China, right?
It was in China. Yeah. And it was alarming. So I'm like, ooh, now's not the time to try my butter tart diet again.
Butter tart diet.
Yeah, I'm Canadian, so, I gotta have the butter tarts. But, at the same time, I'm in touch on social media with a lot of other people that have been eating a ketogenic diet for years. And then I started to see, everyone's in lockdown. They're trying to figure out stuff to do. They're stressed. They're worried. And I start seeing the posts like, I learned how to make sourdough bread today.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I've made 3 loaves of sourdough bread this week,
That's not keto, Karen.
That's not keto. But I'm like, I'm seeing these studies coming in, and the outcomes for people that are metabolically deranged, that are obese, that are diabetic, that are pre-diabetic.
Yeah, scary.
It was pretty scary. And then I started to see pictures of my friends. All of a sudden, you're no longer seeing pictures of their full body. They're not posting that anymore. You just see the head, the top of the head,
the
like angled.
Stick, the top of
the selfie stick. You don't see the under chin area.
The magic angle.
Oh my God! I'm like, I know what that is. I went through that 2 years ago.
Camera trickery.
Yes, yeah, like, oh yeah, and I remember that. So I thought to myself, well, I just went through this, 2 years ago. I'm not doing it again. I'm like, there's no way, especially, with this virus lurking that seems to target diabetics and the obese. So I said, okay, you know what? Like, I've been just sort of maintaining for a while. I'm going to try to get back and figure out what worked, what didn't work, what motivated me, what I found discouraging, and, really figure this out and just start doing this again. And I started doing 100-day alternate day fasts. So it would be 50 days on, 50 days off, because I really every other day alternate day fast.
It wasn't like 50 days of fasting. No,
it was not 50 days fasting. These were alternating days. I don't fast well past like 42 hours, 48 hours. It disrupts my sleep.
Yeah.
So I was doing it depended. When I started, I was doing like 42-hour fasts, but towards the end, the most I could do was 36 hours. I would wake up and I'd be hungry.
Yeah.
You'd lost a lot of weight in that process of that 100-day fasting. So your ability to provide energy from body fat had decreased. There's a rate limit based on how much body fat you have. And so it makes sense that you weren't able to fast for as long because you didn't have, your buffers weren't as large. So that would have made a difference. And this was a challenge. It was an online challenge, wasn't it, on Daisy's forum?
Yeah, it was just something, somebody said, I'm thinking of doing 100 days of alternate day fasting. Who's in? And I'm like, sure. Okay.
How many other people stuck to it?
Everyone, there was a bunch of women that, that this is in the bitches. Can I say bitches? Bitches.
Yeah, you just did.
Bitches. I said it like 3 times now.
Kick our keto bitches.
Kick our keto bitches. There's a little fasting group, little satellite fasting group of women. And there are a handful of us that said, we're all going to do 100 days of alternate day fasting. And then towards the end, it was just me by myself.
But I got to tell you, though, that I did try alternate day fasting, but I wasn't ready for it. And
there's some times where you just have to call it.
Yep.
You just have to call it.
If
it doesn't feel right, don't do it.
If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't actually teach overnight fasting. Like, I'll do it, but I leave, fasting coaching up to the good people over at the Fasting Method, because, they can do things like order labs. And they're the experts. So, if somebody has a day where, they're just not hungry, then that's fine. But I don't really teach it as a method.
Mm-hmm.
So you have an up day, down day, don't you? Instead of fasting.
So instead of what I do is I teach people to have, what I like to do is to see the energy that they're intaking be uneven, because the energy that they're expelling will be uneven anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of keep the body guessing a bit, so you don't have that metabolic downregulation. So they'll have a day where they'll have 2 meals or 3 meals, depending on what their eating patterns are like, and then the next day they will have 1 meal or 2 meals, depending. Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, the goal is to get them to 3 meals, 3 meals.
3 meals, 3 meals. Yeah, I mean, like, for me, if I'm maintaining, what happens is I'll still have a down day, but it'll probably only be, 1 or 2 a week instead of 3 or 4.
Right. Okay.
And the whole time you're ketogenic, so your ketones are high, or not necessarily high, but you're producing ketones, and your blood sugar is low. So that's why you can afford to do that, right? Because it does sound like calorie restriction. And I know this is something that everybody talks about. And I think, Richard, you're going to address this, but it's something that everybody talks about is don't calorie restrict, fat to satiety, that kind of thing. But if you're ketogenic,
I don't say that.
No. I know we don't. I'm saying this is what I hear. Yeah.
No. With me, to me, a calorie deficit isn't very important at all when you're just starting keto. But towards the end, there's going to be a little tweaking of that. I prefer to see people, instead of going too deep into a deficit like I do, to use their body that now is able to easily burn fat for fuel, so you can move.
Right.
To be more active, to go out there and live your life, and to focus more on eating well and moving this new body. To me, if you've done all this work, if you've been eating keto and all of a sudden you go from being tired and lethargic all the time because you're not able to use that energy for fuel, you're storing it instead. Mm-hmm. It's like, to me, if you don't change how you're living your life, it's sort of like, you ever watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off with Cameron's dad in the car, the Ferrari that just sits in the garage and he doesn't even drive it. It's just like, he says, once a week he wipes it down with a diaper. It's like that. It's like, okay, well, so you're towards the end, after you've done, all this work to become a fat burning machine. Well, then you should be out there, burning fat. You need to eat, and you need to, go out there and spend the day playing with your kids, to, go and do all the fun things that you couldn't do when you were just too tired and obese to do them.
Well, I know you say eat the way that you're going to maintain. Try to eat the way that the kinds of meals that you want to eat while you're maintaining. Because
talk about eating as if you're already at your goal. I never want to see somebody eating this caloric deficit below what they would be at their goal. Yeah. So to me, that is just a recipe for disaster. And I think you're talking about BS diets and bullshit diets. And to me, unless it's like a medically supervised diet, you really don't want to start digging yourself into that hole, because there's nowhere to go after that. So,
and that's what happened to you with your toenail.
That's what happened to me. That's what happened to me.
You lowered your metabolic rate. So by reducing your caloric intake and then keeping the foot on the brake for so long, your body had no choice. It had to make furloughs.
No harm in having a day where you're in a steep deficit.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like to see people do that day after day after day.
Can we talk about your social media groups and the journey that you've been on? You started on Facebook, I think. And
when I started looking at it, I decided that, I'd gotten this diagnosis from my doctor. I was pre-diabetic. I had an A1C of 6.2 and I had atrial fibrillation, some other kind of tachycardia, heart issue. I remembered, when I was in my mid-20s, I tried Atkins, and that was the only thing that seemed to really work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I'm just going to do Atkins again. And I went on Facebook and started looking up Atkins groups, and I couldn't really find anything. But I did find a lot of groups that talked about keto. And I'm like, well, I know what ketosis is. That's like phase 1 of Atkins.
Right.
So I joined one of those groups, and, I found good information that helped me along. And through those keto groups, I also discovered time restricted eating and alternate day fasting, because Fung was just getting started with his new book, The Obesity Code. It just coming out.
That's when we started.
Came out
just before that.
Yeah. So before long, I was participating a lot. Getting good information from people, listening to what they had to say, and talking about my experiences. And within a couple of months, I was helping run one of the groups. It's now called Keto Science Alliance.
Keto Science. 100,000 people, right?
There's 100,000 people in that one. There's a sister group that just focuses on recipes. A lot of really good recipe bloggers post their stuff, as well as our home chefs. And there's 100,000 in that one as well. But yeah, I started running these groups, and it really did keep me motivated and inspired by helping other people.
So did you start this holistic keto program after the lockdown experience, or during the lockdown experience? How did that come about? And maybe you could even tell us a little bit about what it is.
This was sort of something that I was thinking about. This was before the lockdown. I was sort of thinking about, now that I've graduated, exactly what do I want to be teaching people? Because, I've got like the Facebook group, which is just sort of general science information, sharing of, support and advice. And I was sort of having like a crisis of confidence that I just didn't know what I wanted to do with this, these shiny new credentials.
Right.
I knew, I didn't want to be like a weight loss coach, because that's kind of boring and frustrating. And
right.
There are other people that are out there, like Kim Howerton is a weight loss coach, Dan Quibel. Bacon Dan, he's a weight loss coach, and they're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
But pounds lost isn't the focus. My focus, I wanted it to be more about health span, about incorporating a nutrition first approach to improving your quality of life. So with that, and I was thinking what direction I want to go in. That's when I formed Holy Holistic Keto. So it's more of, the holistic nutrition is more about mind, body, spirit, with a nutrition first approach. Or Zen.
The moment of Zen.
The moment of Zen. To be Zen-like. And I wanted that to be my focus, other than, body fat percentage,
right,
or food blogging. There's so many people out there that have fantastic food blogs. And so
they probably never eat the food that they probably never eat the food that they
the
that
food
they blog
bloggers
about.
The food bloggers I know that I personally know do eat that food, but there are a few of them that I wonder if they're just licking the burger on the styrofoam bread or not. I have questions.
So you have a traffic light list for your food. You kind of went along with Westman's page 4 style of
or Noakes. As I said, my background was I discovered low carb through Atkins, and he had food lists.
Yeah,
and he wasn't wrong then, and Westman isn't wrong now.
Yep.
I figure if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So because I'm holistic nutrition, my focus is on more whole foods. The best quality of food that you can afford.
Yeah.
Or that you enjoy, and that's suitable for your biochemical individuality. And I choose to work with people that their biochemical individuality is best. So it works best with the low carb diet.
Yeah.
Right. Nice. And you also had exclusion diets as well, didn't you? You had the AIP diet for a while.
The what?
Yeah.
How does that work?
It was
what's AIP?
autoimmune protocol.
Okay.
So there, like Rob Wolf, a few others out there do, autoimmune protocols.
Paleo mom.
Yeah, like a paleo thing. Yeah.
Okay.
And the problem that I have with it is usually there's a lot of things like fruit, dates, starchy tubers in it. So this sort of diet would not work well with my ideal client. So I started to form food lists, an elimination protocol, a gut building protocol.
Okay.
That was also very low carb. And I was doing this, for people to discover food sensitivities. Because, you eliminate all these common sensitivities like egg whites, nuts, nightshades.
Mm-hmm.
And then you slowly add them back. There's a process to add them back. But what I was finding with it when I was, test it out on people, my guinea pigs, were exactly my little guinea pigs. I had some people that, they didn't seem to really have any food sensitivities that they were noticing, like no rashes, no joint aches. But what they were finding was those last stubborn, 10 to 20 pounds that they've been trying to lose for years, all of a sudden came off.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm like, I think I'm going to be using this for more than just food sensitivities. That, they're still eating their normal amount of food, their normal amount of energy. The meal frequency hadn't changed, but what had changed was just taking some foods out and then testing them to see if they were the problem or not. And it was usually something strange, like eggs, that they didn't realize that they had a problem with.
I have the opposite problem. When I eat eggs, pounds come off. I don't know whether.
I have no problem with eggs. Thank goodness.
Love eggs. Yeah.
I have a strange, the last time I did this was in, I think it was April this year. I usually try to do at least, 1 month of it every, year to 6 months. 6 months to a year.
So can you tell us how to...
I thought it was aspartame for me.
Oh, aspartame.
Yeah.
How does one take your program, or is it something that you enroll in? Is it something you download? What's the story?
Well, right now we do have parts of it up on the Ketogenic forums and the Holy Holistic group under community. Okay. But the easiest way is to join my Facebook group, Holy Holistic Keto. Yeah. And it's right there in the pinned announcements. It's going to be there for a little while longer, and then I'm going to take it down because we're going to be focusing on the elimination diet to kickstart stubborn weight loss.
Is this something you charge for?
Yeah, I do one-on-one coaching as well, so that I do charge for.
But all the information you give away.
But the Facebook group is always free. Yeah, no, I'm always there to answer questions.
That's great.
Yeah. But
so
if you want
it's a free program, but if somebody wants face-to-face.
If somebody wants like a more tailored approach, because, sometimes you have to tweak things for different needs. So, if they want that, or if they want, just some more hands-on support, then they opt for the having face-to-face consultations.
That's awesome. Well, Karen, it's a great story, and I'm so happy that you're happy and healthy and doing things to help everybody else. That's what it's all about. So I totally appreciate it. And from all the listeners, thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
And now I think it's time for our new segment. What do we call it, Carl? How do you spell that?
BOOLSHEET.
How else would you spell it?
How else? So what's bullshit today, Richard?
Okay, this week I want to talk about calories in and calories out.
Excellent. I thought that was not bullshit. That's bullshit.
Yes and no. The excess between the calories you eat versus the calories you use is totally stored as extra fuel, mostly as fat, but it could also be stored as lean tissue.
Okay.
The first law of thermodynamics tells us that the amount of energy in a closed system is conserved. So the chemical energy that you extract from food equals the amount of calories of work that's going to be performed by your body plus the amount of calories of heat that's radiated from your body, and the balance is stored as new chemical energy in the form of macromolecules of fat, glucose, and amino acids.
So eating too much and not moving enough is how we get fat?
Oh, no, that's mostly bullshit.
Okay.
Well, let me say rather it's an overly simplistic understanding of the biology involved.
Okay.
Let's start with the fact that we don't actually eat calories.
I'm pretty sure I've eaten some calories.
Actually, you've eaten some potential calories.
Okay.
To get nerdy about it, calories are a unit of energy. 1 calorie is the amount of energy required to increase the temperature of 1 gram of water from 15 degrees Celsius to 16 degrees Celsius. That's just 1 degree rise in temperature.
Okay.
It would be a pretty remarkable trick of biology if we could actually eat energy. No,
now that you say
fuel.
it that way, I totally understand.
We eat fuel. Fuel is potential energy.
Yeah.
Fuel is measured in grams, not calories. This is an important point because if you can't turn fuel into energy, then measuring fuel in calories is a mistake.
Interesting.
Think of it like a full gasoline truck that runs out of fuel. But you might ask, how can it run out of fuel if it has a full load? Well, the truck runs on diesel. It's carrying gasoline. It can turn diesel into energy. It can't turn gasoline into energy. Now, our body's a lot more adaptable than that. We have 2 primary fuels, fat and sugar, and we have a backup fuel of amino acids when we really run into trouble, but that's a topic for another bit of bullshit. So fat and sugar, or to be more accurate, fatty acids and glucose, we convert those in our mitochondria into a molecule called acetyl-CoA.
So is that energy yet as acetyl-CoA?
No, acetyl-CoA is actually more fuel.
Okay.
But this is an all-purpose fuel. It has 2 potential pathways. We can turn it into new fatty acids, or we can slice it up in the Krebs cycle to split the electrons and protons of hydrogen atoms in it in the presence of oxygen and producing carbon dioxide and water.
Okay. Respiration. We convert chemical energy of fuel into electrical energy, and we convert that back into chemical energy in a molecule of ATP that we can use to do work. So
exactly.
Let me just tell you what I think of when I hear ATP. So I think when I hear ATP, I think that this is the sort of like it, as you were saying, you've got some diesel and you've got some gasoline, and you want to convert that into like a standard that all life uses as energy, and every cell in every living thing uses ATP, or is it just in animals?
No, it's every cell. Plants do it as well.
Okay. So ATP is sort of like the universal language. It's like the, what is that? Esperanto.
Esperanto.
It's like the Esperanto of energy. And so the whole thing is everything that you eat and all the energy that's stored in your body as potential energy comes down to ATP. And once it's ATP, it can be directly used by your mitochondria and in your cells.
All of pretty much a lot of the chemical reactions that occur in your body take ATP as a way of, like, you know, if you're playing with a chemistry kit, you might take two chemicals, mix them together, and then put them over a Bunsen burner, and adding the heat to those 2 chemicals will produce a chemical reaction. And maybe the test tube changes color. Well, that ATP is like the heat that you're adding to a reaction to make it happen. So it's a way of adding energy into a system to get these chemicals over the hump so that they combine and produce the reactants.
Excellent. So we could go on with metaphors, but you know,
yeah, I think we can add at least 5 more metaphors.
It's like the JavaScript
it's a Rube
of
Goldberg.
energy.
It's like a Rube Goldberg of metaphors.
Yeah. Okay.
So precisely, we're now at energy.
Yeah.
I mean, ATP is pretty much it is a chemical that has a lot of pent up energy in it, and we can turn ATP into ADP and utilize that energy to run all of our reactions. And those reactions could be like actin and myosin in your muscle fibers, which are pulling muscle fibers together so that you contract your muscles, so that you can walk or run or do a triathlon or whatever. So here's why calories in, calories out is simplistic. If you get all of the fatty acids and glucose from your food, these are your fuels, and you get them all into your mitochondria and you convert them all into ATP, then the grams of fuel in your food equals precisely the amount of energy that you have to do work. So this is a very simplistic way of looking at the grams that I'm eating are equal to the calories that I have to use. So any excess acetyl-CoA beyond your need for ATP, you export out of the mitochondria into the cell, you make new fat from it, and you send it off for storage, and you may use that later on.
I have another metaphor. Solar energy.
Right. Excellent.
Solar energy. So you have solar panels, and without any way to store the energy that comes from solar panels, like a battery,
you got to use it.
You have to use it or you lose it.
Yeah.
And so
exactly.
The simplistic view of calories in, calories out is kind of like having a solar panel with no storage.
With no battery.
With no battery.
Exactly. Yeah, so your body fat is essentially a buffer. It's that battery that buffers between a good day and a bad day.
Yeah.
The whole thing here is that any excess energy that we don't have, we store in our battery. So it's obvious: eat less and move more, and you'll store less body fat.
Yeah, it sounds simple. So why do people hold on to this simplistic view of calories in, calories out?
Hormones are why. So a healthy human makes insulin in response to the appearance of excess glucose and protein in circulation. Say they've had a mixed meal. Insulin is a switch between the two fuels. To run your engines on glucose, it's high, and to run your engines on fatty acids, it's low. When insulin is high, your fat cells stop releasing fatty acids into circulation, and they import them from circulation. When insulin is high, your peripheral cells start drawing down glucose from circulation, and any excess acetyl-CoA that they have, they make new fat from, and they ship it out to fat cells to store for later.
Okay.
So that's what happens when insulin is high. When insulin goes low, your fat cells release free fatty acids into circulation, and your cells all switch to running on fat.
So that's a healthy, normal person. How about someone who has metabolic syndrome?
That's where it becomes interesting. In us, insulin is permanently elevated. We have higher highs and higher lows. And here's the problem. Insulin signals not only the uptake of glucose, but the production of new fat.
Yeah.
Insulin promotes the transcription of an enzyme called acetyl-CoA carboxylase, or ACC. And this is the first enzyme in the pathway that turns our all-purpose fuel acetyl-CoA into new fat.
And we made that all-purpose fuel from glucose, right? So when we have too much glucose, we turn it into fat.
But we actually make acetyl-CoA from both fatty acids and glucose. So we're making new fat from glucose or making new fat from old fat when this pathway is switched on. I'm going to link to a study, Andrea Leyes et al., showing that when insulin is high, we have 4 times the amount of this enzyme than when insulin is low, even when glucose is low.
Okay.
And this study is stimulation of acetyl-CoA carboxylase gene expression by glucose requires insulin release and SREBP1C in pancreatic beta cells. I'll also link a second study, Witters et al., showing that insulin signals that enzyme to turn on by dephosphorylating it on.
Dephosphorylating it.
And I'll link a second study, Witters et al., showing that insulin signals that enzyme to turn on by dephosphorylating it.
Dephosphorylating.
Yes.
Hey, honey, I learned a new vocabulary word.
Essentially what it does is insulin does 2 things here. It says we need more of this protein that's going to be converting acetyl-CoA into new fats. We need 4 times as much, and we need to turn them all on so they're all running at full speed. So insulin signaling, independent of fuel availability, diverts fuel from making energy into making more fuel.
It really is a switch.
So this is the point where, this is a a metabolically dysregulated switch because it's actually preventing us from turning fuel into energy.
Yeah.
And this is not just a problem of fuel being generally diverted to make more fat, but this process also steps on the hose of transporting fatty acids into the mitochondria. So I've got a third paper here from Park et al. Showing that, at least in rats, a diabetic rat is making 50 times the new fat as measured by the rate constant of inhibition of malonyl-CoA on carnitine palmitoyl transferase. This is the transporter we spoke about last show.
Yeah.
The diabetic rat makes 50 times more new fat than a non-diabetic rat on the same mixed feed chow. Showing that, at least in rats, diabetic rats have to become 50 times more resistant to this inhibition just to get a little fatty acid into the mitochondria to be turning into fuel, with a very good chance instead of turning them into new fatty acids, which is not very helpful at all.
So maybe some of you listening out there have had this experience where, you look at somebody who can eat potato chips and pizza and not gain a pound. And, and then their blood sugar comes right down, and you say, man, if I had one bite of that pizza, it'd take me a week to recover.
Oh, the problem is you can't utilize fatty acids. And so, this explains why type 2 diabetics have such high triglycerides in circulation. It's not triglycerides. People keep saying, oh, their circulation is full of energy. No, it's not energy if it can't be oxidized. It's not even really fuel anymore. It's just some inert molecule that's shipped around the place looking for a mitochondria and low enough insulin to become fuel one day. And in a hyperinsulinemic, insulin rarely drops.
Yeah.
Because we're permanently running out of energy, that drives hyperphagia and exercise intolerance, or if you want to look at those in moral terms, gluttony and sloth are biochemical adaptations to chronically high insulin.
So when we lower insulin by not eating carbohydrates, it's not calories in that makes a difference. It's calories out.
Right. Think of your body like a bathtub storing energy. The fuel coming in is the open faucet. The drain is where you convert fuel into energy. And there's a face washer stuck in the drain. So what happens?
Yeah, the bathtub overflows all over the floor. And then people say, I see your problem. There's water on the floor. Thanks, genius.
Exactly. Right. The metabolic syndrome, with fuel being stored everywhere, even in places where it shouldn't be. So what happens if you turn down the faucet if you eat less food?
Well, the tub still overflows, but maybe a little slower than it did before.
Yeah. And what happens if you yank the face washer out of the drain?
Whoosh.
Whoosh. Exactly. So this is the first 6 months on the keto diet for a type 2 diabetic. When we lower insulin for the first time in decades, the level in the tub goes down until the rate that the drain draws down equals the amount coming in from the faucet, and that's when you're on a plateau. But the important thing is the fuel is where it's supposed to be, not all over the floor.
Hey, but I was promised some bullshit here, man.
Oh, yeah, the bullshit is the idea that the cause of being obese is gluttony and sloth, that calories in, calories out is any kind of complex math, and that describing the laws of conservation of energy has anything to do with biology, and that fat people just need to put down the Krispy Kreme and do a crisp 5K.
Oh, yeah, that is bullshit. People who've never been morbidly obese have no idea. Just like we were saying before, never take dietary advice from a thin person. Anyway, that speaks to how our experience and our collective experience, I know we've all experienced this, us just recently, Richard, that people look at us and say, what are those fatties doing talking about keto? Like they're some kind of diet experts. Those guys need to eat a salad. Right? And then you don't know that you lost 100 pounds.
You got face washes in the drain.
And I lost 100 pounds and Karen lost 100 pounds and, Tom Cease lost 300 pounds and he's still obese. So, everything's relative.
It is. But the point is that we don't have water all over the floor. We've got the water in the tub, which is where it's supposed to be.
Excellent.
So, it's a metabolically safer state to be in.
Excellent. And that's bullshit for today. And that brings us to...
Recipes!
With Carrie Brown. How are you, Carrie?
Hello, Cousin Carl. How are you?
Just fine.
I'm Mr. Franklin. No, you're Mr. Morris. I'm so confused.
Wait.
It's so hot. It's so hot. All my brain cells are kind of merging.
It's the middle of winter. Seriously.
What do you mean hot?
I seriously wish I was in Australia right now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. We're in lockdown.
Well, I feel like I'm in lockdown here.
Yeah, fair enough.
What do you got for us, Carrie?
Well, last week, or I should say last episode, we talked about 2 new things that I was doing just for me that weren't real recipes, that were just 2 things that I'm finding super helpful right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm still on that kind of train of doing recipes that like take no time and no effort.
Quick and easy.
I think there's a lot of people that are struggling to get back on, and the thought of just spending a ton of money or a ton of time or effort or whatever in going in the kitchen and creating your own food can be the difference between you staying keto or not in some cases. So I am still in the mode of sharing things that are super simple, super easy, but super delicious.
Great.
Give it to us. What do you got?
And this one today is actually very quickly became a fan favorite. So this one always gets lots of cheers and loves when I post the link on social media. And it's a nod to my new Nutmegger roots. Mm-hmm. Nutmegger being, for those of you who don't know, Nutmegger is the colloquialism name for people who live in Connecticut.
Yes.
Ah.
The reason for that isn't actually very good, but
Wooden nutmegs.
Wooden nutmegs, yes. A long time ago, we became famous for selling wooden nutmegs to people, and hence the name Nutmegger. Okay. Anyway, so this is a riff on a very, very, very popular thing, which is the Philly cheesesteak. But of course, no bread in this one. So this recipe is called the Sheet Pan Nutmegger Cheesecake. And if you have not ever been introduced to sheet pan recipes, they're essentially recipes where you get all your ingredients and you sling them on a sheet pan or a cookie sheet.
Yep.
Or a baking tray, depending on what country you're in. And you put it in the oven and everything cooks together, and then you pull it out and you have this pan of glorious food. Yeah. So there are a ton of sheet pan recipes online, but a lot of them actually, the way they're developed, you actually have to like put something in, open the oven, add something, and they end up taking you as long as if you'd used the skillet. This is not that. This is a real sheet pan recipe that you put in and forget it and then eat it.
Nice.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then in a large bowl, we're going to put half a cup of avocado or coconut oil. We're going to toss some sea salt and ground black pepper in there, 4 tablespoons of coconut aminos, and a tablespoon of ground nutmeg. And we're going to...
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
I've always wondered what coconut aminos are and what they replace in the non-keto world or the non-nutritional world.
So they're typically, and you do, caveat, you do have to read the label as always, because all coconut aminos are not the same, and they're typically used to replace Worcester sauce.
Worcestershire.
Or
Worcestershire.
Worcestershire, as the Canadians taught me to say it.
Worcestershire. I love watching people try to pronounce that on
yes, and I was too polite to correct them the first time I went to Canada. So Worcestershire sauce is what it typically replaces.
And does it taste like Worcestershire? Does it have the juniper notes and all that stuff?
It does have that same tang. I think on its own you could tell a difference, but when you mix it in with all the other things, you're not gonna miss your Worcestershire sauce.
Okay. So
you're going to put all those in a bowl. You're going to mix them together well. And then you're going to add 2 pounds of shaved steak. Now, shaved steak is something that we can just go to the store and buy in the US. It's typically in the in prepackaged in the freezer section is where I've seen it most often. Although sometimes you can find it prepackaged in the fresh meat section. If shaved steak is not something that comes prepackaged where you are, you can simply ask your butcher to shave you some steak.
Yeah, thinly
Does
sliced.
it involve a razor blade? Like a safety blade? Shaving cream?
Lather up and...
So,
I can always count on you to make my recipes way more exciting.
so I know that in Australia, Costco sells meat in a style called yakinori cut, which is sliced finely, and they have pork, beef, and I think it's just pork and beef, but it's sliced finely in maybe 5mm thick shavings, and it'd be perfect for this. So yeah, yakinori.
I actually got Kelly to get off of Steakums, which I don't even know what that stuff is made out of, and onto shaved steak, and she liked the real steak better.
Mm-hmm.
So shaved steak is literally like paper thin steak that's been cut into paper thin, and if you hold it up, you can actually like see light through it. So it's but shaved steak is, you actually need that for this recipe to work, because in order to have everything cook in the same time at the same temperature, you need that steak to be really, really thin. So if you can't find it where you are, just ask your butcher to shave you some beef.
I also have another observation, which is that when you have meat, when you're cooking meat that's shaved very thin, you have more surface area in which to collect, the cooking fat.
The tasty stuff.
The tasty stuff. So it tends to be tastier.
Yeah. So you're going to get your 2 pounds of shaved steak, and then you're going to get 12 ounces of thinly sliced bell peppers, 9 ounces of thinly sliced onions, 8 ounces of sliced mushrooms, and you're going to toss all of those things in your seasonings until everything is thoroughly coated.
I like where this is going, Carrie.
It's a marinade.
Yes. So then you're going to spread the meat and veggie mixture onto a sheet pan baking tray, or 2 small ones. In the US, we can get ones that are half size, so you can do 2 half size or 1 full one. And then you're going to place your sheet pan in the middle shelf of your preheated oven, and you're going to bake it for 15 minutes, which is all it needs to cook the beef.
At what temperature?
400.
400 Fahrenheit.
400 F.
Yes, 400 F. So after 15 minutes, you're going to turn the oven off, and you're going to turn the broiler or the grill on. You're carefully going to remove the pan from the oven, and you're going to spread a mix of 6 ounces of shredded mozzarella and 6 ounces of shredded Gruyere. You're going to spread that evenly over the surface. Then you're going to pop the pan under the broiler for 5 minutes until the cheeses have melted. And then you're going to take it out from under the broiler, and you're going to eat it. And you're going to be super happy.
And watch it as it broils, because your oven may be hotter than Carrie's, and it might take only 30 seconds. And,
Yes, some broilers you can actually change the temperature, and others are just like on or off.
Low or high.
Yes.
So,
a general rule of thumb is you have anything under the broiler, don't leave.
That sounds delicious. It sounds like an elevated cheesesteak.
Yes.
Well, that's what it is. One way I really like to have cheesesteaks in a keto context is to get an iceberg lettuce and make a lettuce cup, and then put the cheesesteak in the lettuce cup, and then fold it over and eat it like, it's like fast food. It's like finger food.
I know what I'm having for dinner.
Yeah, and of course you can if you miss the bread and you have access to something like Foxhill buns, something like that. You can totally pile this into a Foxhill bun, or if you've made the hoagies with Foxhill mix, you can totally make it into a Philly cheesesteak sandwich if you want to.
We do that here at our house. We take one batch of Foxhill all-purpose mix, Again, this is not an infomercial. It's not a paid advertisement.
Red.2keto.com.
That's true. Okay. Only because we love it. Only because we love it.
Yes.
It's not an advert.
No,
Just,
we don't get paid for this.
we
But,
talk about 'em a
but
lot.
basically take one batch and turn it into 3 long baguettes. And then I actually cook it in a baguette pan. And so when it comes out, it has that nice pattern on the bottom, that you see with baguettes.
Yes.
They have that pattern.
Yes.
And I let them cool, slice it in half, and then I actually dig out the middle. It's the Bobby Flay trick of, to increase the stuffing to bread ratio in a burger or a sandwich. You scoop out the middle so that you only have the crispy bits and you don't have the spongy stuff so much. And then put that in the toaster and crisp it up till it's like cracker crispy.
Yeah.
And that makes the best hoagies, grinders, sub sandwiches, whatever you want to call them.
So if you piled this sheet pan nutmeg cheesecake into that would be fabulous. I'll be
Excellent.
over later.
You better. Thanks, Gary.
Nice. Thanks, Carrick.
See ya.
Hey, thanks for listening.
We hope you get as much out of this information as we do in putting it together.
2 Keto Dudes doesn't take advertising revenue. We have no benefactors with hidden agendas.
That's right. It's all listeners like you who keep our lights on.
And there are a few ways you can support us, all of which are listed on our website at 2ketodudes.com/support.
Thanks again.
See you next time.